Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Avery Castillo, and I'm the production editor for Flower Song Press. Um, this monthly reading series is titled essentially Poetic and Essential Voices Reading Series for Community Building, and it is our goal for this reading series to amplify the essential voice through literary art for community building. And this space right here is free of judgment and hate and is a place for writers, readers, and admirers to come together to listen and uplift one another in a very creative, poetic, and intentional online space. I ask that you all remain muted until while the readings are taking place. And at the end of all of our four readers that are here tonight who have read, we will then be taking time for questions and conversation. And so you can use the chat feature to post your questions into the chat, and we will moderate them as we receive them to our authors. And so we are in for a very special night with very talented writers, artists, scholars, and who are also Flower Song Press authors. And with that, I wanted to jump right in and introduce Edward Vidari, who is publisher and managing editor of Flower Song and host and extraordinaire for this reading event this evening. Edward.
Thank you, Avery. And thank you to all of you who are able to make it on this evening. Usually it's at the end of the month, but being that there's holidays coming up and not everyone will attend, I figured we would get a better crowd if we did it before all that, craziness starts. Um, Again, this is a safe space. All questions will be moderated for us to ask the authors on our end. We do appreciate you being here. I see that many of you are friends of the authors, maybe family as well, but we're all family today, and we thank you for being here. My name is Edward Vidaure. I am the Flower Song Press publisher and editor in chief. And this is the first installation of Essentially Poetic, where all of the authors reading are pressmates with Flower Song. And so I'm excited about it. Um, we are entering the stretch, the end of the year for Flower Song Press. And we are aiming at hitting 25 books this year again, as we did last year, not including anthologies and other books. But again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Avery. Thank you to our guests that are waiting for this powerful presentation, because every author here has some great, great work and are very powerful and important to our community. So we're going to start today with Dr. Amy Shimshon Santo. She is a writer and educator who believes that creativity is a powerful tool for personal and social transformation. She was born on Tovan Garland in current day Los Angeles and has immediate family in the Southwest, the Middle East, and South America. Her art and community work nourish inclusive cultural ecologies for planetary justice. You can connect with her at amyshimshon.com, and I'll be providing links on the chat for on their websites or links to their books. So, Amy, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Avery. Thank you, everyone in the space. Thank you, Flower Song, for holding the space for us. I hope that our collective poetics and efforts can humanize ourselves and each other to become more able to organize effectively for justice, peace, and possibility while denouncing harm and abuse of power. And special congrats and sending flowers to my pressmates, Genevieve, to Sarah for her new book, and to Ayo Kunle for his upcoming book coming up next year. For listeners, I want to say that if anything I read or say tonight is triggering for you, please feel free to take a break, get a cup of tea, or whatever you like to drink. And, I'll be done in around 10, 15 minutes and you can come back. I'm going to begin with just an excerpt of an essay called Safe. 1 month ago, a loud siren pulled us from sleep. I rose from bed. I shared with my daughter to meet my cousin in the hallway. The night before was Shabbat of Simchat Torah. We gathered across 4 generations of family to share food and light candles. We took photos of the reunion of 2 sisters, my mother and my aunt, the eldest living members of our family. The festivities went late, so we stayed at my cousin's flat. She is now holding the hand of her youngest daughter and speaking to me in the dark. Come, come, she says as sirens scream. My daughter and I follow her downstairs to the mamad where we crouch together, 2 mothers, my grown daughter, and my cousin's 3 young children. Does the door to the bomb shelter lock? When sirens stop, the sound of missiles begin. My cousin's youngest son looks up at me. Boom, he mouths in slow motion with his voice and fingers. No mother should be bombed. No child should be bombed. Now I know just how privileged I have been. I know privilege in relation to bombing. This is the hierarchy. People who are not bombed. People who are bombed and have a bomb shelter. People who have no bomb shelters. Sirens shake every cell of the body. They come throughout the day and in the night. I can expect nothing from this world. Anything has become possible. There are everyday worlds and there is a universe of war. They are 2 trains, 2 flipped tracks. When the tracks shift, there are different rules. In come the warlords you imagined to be free of. They are everywhere. They have been here all along. The land is injured too. Beautiful places are made graveyards. I see Fadi Judah interviewed. He looks hollow and broken. His young niece is expecting her last days. I write him an email of concern. He answers with 2 simple lines. 49 dead of my relatives so far. And for those who are living, there is a life worse than death. I write him 5 notes and rate each one. I finally type, your family deserves perfect care and possibility, and press send. But it's not enough. Not at all enough. I've been behind corners to weep and write my saddest poem because it's true. What are the stories people have told themselves to become so extraordinarily violent and disparaging of each other? What have we romanticized about identity, faith, or place to justify heinous acts? If you believe in people, invest in people. If you believe in justice, be about justice. War is the loss of lives and infrastructure and dreams and time. War is the worst use of human energy and potential. I don't believe any divine force would bless a rifle or a bomb. I believe that there is enough space and resources for everybody. I want to believe that someday we can all be ourselves, be in proximity, and thrive. For now, I will apologize to the future. There is no safety anywhere until we convince ourselves otherwise. Witness. I am the person formerly known as. Now she is the bird left behind from the flock. She is the figure weeping in the sand, a witness, witnessed only by the sea. I am not a war correspondent or social media expert. I am not a documentarian of suffering. Don't worry, I have nothing to teach you and nothing to say. I'm just skipping words like stones along the water, knowing they will bounce and then sink. The birds laugh at us. Birds side-eye sonic jets and helicopters. Maybe they will tell the trees what's going on, what they feel and see. Last week, I was a writer. Today, I am a barnacle on the belly of a whale, moaning like an underwater animal. When did time stop? When will it start back up? Will it? Is this the new time, the timeless time, lost in unknowing? I'm not a flag. I am no longer really a woman. I just gave birth to life. I'm not of faith, just faithful. Broken bones and heavy stones, how far will you tumble? How far down will you fall? 6 days ago was the Sabbath. We gathered across 4 generations, cousins with cousins, sisters with sisters, brothers and children and grandparents. 6 days ago was a Friday. Today is 6 days past the moment of miracles, 6 days past the attacks. If I'm going to sit with the page, I have to say, I don't want to say, I want this to not be true. Before I speak, if I speak, I want you to know that I am wrong. Not because I know nothing, but because everything is wrong. Not everything, but the big forces of power that evaporate worlds. I don't want to remind my mind and relive what has become a beginning. 24 times 6 ago, there was a night where we could lay down and hope to sleep. I don't want to state the facts because the facts are a mash of kindnesses and disasters. I am the person formerly known as a self. I melted into the Mediterranean, sonic booms above our heads. My tears salt the water and make everything sting. I want to tell you about the weeping, the mother collapsing onto her belly like a conch shell whose life has departed. She is the throwaway, the detritus of those left behind. This is the last poem I'm going to read that's like new stuff I've just been obviously writing the last few weeks. I was someone's they, and they were mine. I was they, and they were them. They is so much simpler than a someone. They this, they that. They're looking for a reaction. They're trying to trigger you. They couldn't give a shit if you're alive or dead. They bound them together before they struck the match. They have made the choice, us or them. They bomb civilians. They destroy a hospital. They are buried in the rubble. They have no bread or water. They must be rescued immediately. They may not make it through the night. They have written their children's names on their wrists. They want the aid to enter. They want the bombing to cease. There are intense negotiations. They are brokering a deal. They want all hostages released immediately. They are mad at what the released hostages say. They want him to resign. They met with the United Nations. They were warned not to meet with the United Nations. They are negotiating their release. They were murdered in the bombings. They are relatives. They are counting the dead, making estimates. They are a numeric quantity of cadavers. They identify the burnt cadavers by their dental records. They are using DNA sampling to determine who they are. They are covered with fabric before burial. They are buried in mass graves. They are mourning. They have not slept for weeks. They are afraid to speak aloud in their own languages. They tell their children not to speak when they go outside. They want to be invisible. They are not at all alike. They are siblings. They are being translated. They are watching different news feeds. They are seeing different images. They are in danger. They didn't include you in their statement. They wanted to burn down the house. They bombed the city center. They wanted to make music. They wanted to grow vegetables. They wanted to grow old. They wanted a place to be. They want to harvest the olives. They want to milk the cows. They marvel at the burnt orange sun. They want dignity. They have a corrupt and tyrannical government. They have a corrupt and tyrannical government. They have disrupted any hopes for peace. They want us to believe in a them. It's hard to write about hard things, but I'd have to lie to you guys to say this isn't where I was born. So I'm just trying to process it all and hold what I can and be a part of something better. The next few poems are coming from a book that came out a couple years ago with Flower Song called Catastrophic Molting. And I'm not going to read it tonight, but there is a poem in here honoring Elijah McClain, and given what happened with one of the police officers being released this week who was associated with his death. If you have the book, there is a poem in here for him. Dirge. He has made his ignorance a crown, and the flesh of the earth a mortuary. Our species digs and digs its own grave. Ceasefire. Alto al fuego. Cesar fogo. I awoke from sleep as if an earthquake shook the curve of our planet without sides. Deafening quiet, the sound of a ceasefire. Me desperté del sueño, como si un terremoto sacudiera la curva de nuestro planeta sin lados. Silencio ensordecedor, el sonido de un alto el fuego. Eu acordei do sono, como se um terremoto sacudia a curva do nosso planeta sem lados. Calma, ensurdecedor, o som de um cessar-fogo. This is just an excerpt of a poem called Artifacts. The state is an artifact of exclusion. The military is an artifact of sorrow. The body is a fact. Children are the artifacts of families. Communities, the artifacts of forestation. Bombs are also facts. The present is an artifact of depravity. The past, an artifact of curatorial power. The future to be determined. This poem is called Sidur. A new book could be written. No calm or peace or future will ever come from denying people a sense of home. No story, home, has the right to obliterate all other stories of home. Home is shaped by the stories people tell about the land. Stories are made up things made real on the land. Some stories clobber other stories. They aim to obliterate. Hold up a mirror to militarism. May the bloody generations of outsidering end with us. And this last poem is called I Held the War. I held the war inside my body, suffocating, head pulled down into the rubble. Now I am longing for the olive tree warbler to return. Jerusalem sage, tall as children. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I look forward to hearing everyone else's reading tonight and send you all love.
Thank you, Amy. Up next, we have Genevieve Betts. She's the author of the poetry collections A New Kind of Tongue from Flower Song Press and An Unwalled City from Prolific Press. Her work has appeared in Sleep Magazine, Her work has appeared in Sleep Magazine, Hotel America, the Tishman Review, the Literary Review, Cloudbank, Sky Island Journal, and in other journals and anthologies. She is an assistant professor at Santa Fe Community College and teaches for Arcadia's University's Low Residency MFA program in Glenside, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Genevieve.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Avery. Thank you, Amy, and my other fellow readers, and for everybody that came tonight. The poems I'll read are from my newest book. I have it here. I can Vanna White it for you. I, in this book, wrestle a little bit between being, between places. So I wrote this book partly in Brooklyn and then partly in Santa Fe. And a lot of it deals with the struggles between adapting to new language, to new culture, to the joy of doing that, adapting and learning more about that new culture. I'm going to start with the first poem of the book, which kind of metaphorically represents this shift. New Light. I want to speak the language of crickets and circuits, circus elephants, crushed velvet and poetry and tar pits. My eyes are crammed with skyscrapers. I want to look at every flower's center as the face of God, the mascara black asterisk striking the inside of the tulip cup, the pollen-tipped whiskers of the tiger lily, the iris's beard, purple and unfurling like a bridge's backbend into an island. The poor daffodils spent all spring with their faces in the rain sludge. So did I, for that matter, trying to mumble through my trumpet mouth mudded shut. I will have to speak a new yellow, the saturated canary of the sun, burn a new light in place of the old one. This next few poems deal with the joys of parenthood. I'm being kind of sarcastic. All the complications that come with it. This is a pretty decent chunk of these poems in my new book. I wanted to represent the mother figure as realistic and, at least in some cases, pandemic tinged. Working from home. Not domestic bliss, but the ever-present demand for breakfast. I become Eggland's best bitch, scramble and poach and fry in the kitchen. No amount of coffee is too much. I read Derrida and Rushdie while my 4-year-old composes songs about farts and penises. I refuse to deconstruct his lyrics. I speed read poetry. My 7-year-old opens Derricott's Tender and asks, "What's a clitoris?" He renders me dictionary, mother and anatomy teacher, contextualizer of all adult things. We watch the latest Trump news, and I expect that at any moment, in the midst of my emailing back a student about her manuscript, he'll ask me to define porn star, collusion, and impeachment. Sadly, still pertinent today. Parental concern. When I stare at my 2 sons, building cities out of Legos, or constructing couch forts, or pretending to be kitty cats, I can't help but think of all of the mothers of serial killers saying that they did the very same thing, reared intelligent and kind and compassionate children, just to find out they raised mass shooters and stranglers and necrophiliacs. Ted Bundy's mom said that he was the best son in the world, and he murdered young women, later revisiting and playing with their corpses. Sometimes he would take their heads home, keep them in the fridge, apply eyeshadow to decaying eyelids, garish lipstick to lackluster skin. Klebald's mom called Dylan her sunshine boy. He opened fire and massacred a bunch of other parents' children. I imagine this is different than being one of those parents that sees years of evidence. Kids lighting ants on fire, killing the neighbor's cat, torturing and injuring younger siblings. I am looking for signs, clues of any evil in my babies. I am looking in their corneas for any telltale wasp flickering. I am keeping an eye out for dead kittens in the gladiolas. This next poem imagines a mother wilder than myself, but the overall idea still applies. Part-time freedom. After I drop the kids off at school, I get high in the backyard and walk around the kitchen naked. Drive to Tina's shooting range, open fire on silhouettes of paper. Go to Chili's, order never-ending chips and salsa and margaritas. Blast Riot Girls and rap, smoke a cigarette while I take out the trash. Netflix and chill by myself, lie to my husband about it later. Take shits with the door open and read Murakami and Morgan Parker. Balance a plate of not yet melty brie on my belly, eat the whole thing. Am beautiful for no one, concede only when the school day is done. This next poem is my book's title poem, mainly because it deals with my move from the East Coast to the Southwest. It opens with an epigraph. High desert. Still, everything that is singular has a name. Stone, song, trembling, waste, and snow. Larry Levis. This includes the single-legged crow hopping down the road and across the dry arroyo. Aspen leaves rattle and clack while bumblebees zigzag a maze of lavender. Today, I name this place home, though it is so unlike my last one. No neon bodega glow or rush hour foot traffic. No train rumble and stink rising from grates in the street. But a Pueblo-made city, gloom stuffed in an effigy and burned annually. Pinon and hatch chili sold by the side of the road. Chamisa burning gold. All of the singular names I marble in my mouth become a new kind of tongue. When I first moved to Santa Fe, I was lucky enough to hear about Tony Hoagland doing these free poetry workshops. And so I had a chance to go to some of those workshops before he passed away in 2018. This next poem is for Tony. Some spell. In the fall, there is so much beautiful death. The wind's breath grows cold, and I think of the old poet, his bones sharp after treatment, his bald head covered to hide what no one is supposed to know. Aspen leaves fall like yellow confetti, but we are not celebrating. I imagine him nevertheless spry over letters, his last manuscript. I want to reach into the scenery of this city and unfold the mountains origami. Hill roadkill like a backwoods witch. I want to place my hands on his chest and mutter some spell, any words I can muster to make him well, though I'm sure he would tell me in true professor fashion, the rhythm of your line needs more syllables. Try again. And I will actually follow that one with a poem that I wrote in one of his workshops. He gave us the exercise to model a poem after Philip Larkin's poem Water, which begins with the lines, if I were called in to construct a religion. Color. If I were called in to construct a religion, it would be a cult of color. Each temple a home to a different hue. My temple would be blue, a bright teal like the iridescent shimmer of a mallard's neck, or a polished turquoise, the stone-veined black. We would pray to Iris, goddess of all colors, made-up colors too. The crayon they call macaroni and cheese, and blurple, a mix of purple and blue. We would baptize in deep vats of dye like Easter eggs, hang crystals in windows to scatter rainbows like stained glass, take communion, blackberry Malbec, and an ochre Eucharist. Where I work at Santa Fe Community College, we had a pretty notable active shooter drill a few years ago. It was the second of its kind because we had students who were covered in fake blood that had volunteered to line the hallways. And we had an actual, actor going through the halls and firing blanks. At that same time, I was teaching a class for UNM Los Alamos, one of their satellite campuses, and 2 of my students were shot and 1 was killed just after one of our classes. So these next 2 poems were written in the haze of those gun-related incidents. Run, hide, fight. Active shooter drill at the community college. Culinary students smothered in fake blood line the hallways to your office. An actor runs by yelling, firing blank shots. Over here, 2 students talking about hunting, making elk jerky. Note their access to guns. Note your own childhood access to guns. 2 weeks later, both are shot. R survives, Cameron dies. Cameron was your best student. See again the dead deer in your childhood backyard. Eyes wet, cut out tongue longer than you thought it would be. Dad's hand inside her sliced open abdomen. The unhidden gun in the back waistband of a Crown Heights neighbor, the front of your building shot up during a quick bodega run. Your old neighbors in Philly, murder-suicide, bodies on the other side of your apartment wall, the one your baby's crib was up against. Note the lack of windows in your current classroom, the nearest exits, the lack of makeshift weapons, just chairs and pencils. Note a student's anger at a bad grade, another student's grim silence. Watch the run, hide, fight video at work. Remember when Homeland Security was a non-existent department of government. Remember when your job didn't require students to play dead. The deer opens her mouth wide, is trying to tell you something. See the stump where her tongue once was. Wonder if a human shot in the head looks that alive just after death. Roadside memorials. It's winter, and in Santa Fe, people in trucks pull over to decorate roadside memorials. Christmas lights and plastic wreaths, sacred candles and figurines. It seems too festive for death, but I can understand the impulse to visit the place of passing, the spot where loved ones took their last sideways glance at speeding SUVs, where their ghosts peeled away from their bodies. There are too many of these vigils, and I'm daily reminded of my student, just 18, randomly shot in the head while driving. I wonder if his street-side memorial has Christmas lights. I wonder if his ghost hovers above those nearby snowy mountains, watching cars go by like insect exoskeletons. At night, a string of lights that just for him light up like fireflies. Okay, to wrap up, these last few poems I'll read are centos, which means that they take all of their lines from other sources. I have a whole series of these woven throughout the book. Most of them take their language from novels. This first one takes all of its language from David Mitchell's novel, Ghostwritten. A question of wholeness. Paths forked off and forked off some more. I followed the monk through a maze of cloisters. We came to a quiet place, a grave. The milky turquoise vow of silence hung white in the twilight. I passed through a great doorway and stood in a network of tunnels. The music of dulcimers lit the path. Holy mountain, I feel like I've climbed out of a dark box and into quasars. There are so many cities, in every single city, sometimes language can't even read the music of meaning, the me that lives in me. I'm this person, I'm that person, I'm that person too. Tiny life form of star compost full of the sun and the moon. Right. And the last one I'll read tonight takes all of its language from Tom Robbins' novel, Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. History. The first amoeba that ever lived is still alive. It weeps for the decline of poets, tumbleweed, the peyote wagon, the distant buttes and canyons, the sky full of blades grinning like piranha in their cases. The mastodons are all gone, so are the Amazons. Timbuktu is now a roadside zoo so grand and giant and elegant that your heart squeezed out eternity's toothpaste. So early the bluebirds hadn't brushed their teeth yet. History isn't ever going to end, and history is ending every second. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Up next, we have Ayo Kunle Falomo. He's a Nigerian American and author of African American, which was a finalist for the Helen C. Smith Memorial Award for Best Book of Poetry from the Texas Institute of Letters. He's also published he also has two self-published collections and African American from New Delta Review 2019, selected by Sela Satterstrom as the winner of New Delta Review's 8th annual chapbook contest. A recipient of fellowships from Vermont Studio Center, MacDowell, and the University of Michigan's Helen Zell Writers Program, where he obtained his MFA in creative writing, poetry. His work has been anthologized and widely published in print and online, the New York Times, Houston Public Media, Michigan Quarterly Review, the Texas Review, New England Review, Right About Now, among others. You can find more information about him at his website, afalomo.com, or you can purchase his book through flowersongpress.com as well. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Edward. Yeah, thank you again for gathering all of us together tonight. It's really, yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here in community with people whose voices are being, amplified. And I'm also like very, very honored to be part of that chorus. Um, Thank you, Edward, for making this happen. Thank you also, Avery, for being part of this. Just want two comments. Thank you, Amy, so much for your what I'll call journalistic clarity. It is so needed, I feel, during these times. And Genevieve, the tender, humor of your work is so very much appreciated. Like those like small noticings that sort of like might fall by the wayside, I feel like are amplified in your work. And I'm so very grateful for you both. And I'm very, very excited to hear from Sarah later today. Um, so sort of in a weird place because it feels like both a need to say a lot and also like just listen. So sort of like struggling with what to do with that tonight. I'm gonna read maybe 3 or 4 poems, and also, that just allows space for people in the audience to like contribute to the, conversation that we have earlier. So there's a lot of stuff going through my mind, going through my brain, as is true for a lot of us. So I'll start with a poem from the book that was published through Flower Song, African American. It is a prayer. It is kind of an invocation just to invite that spirit into the room. Uh, it is a poem that is a prayer. That is for Erica Garner. That is for Brianna Taylor. That is for Oluwatoyin Salau. That is for the Chibok girls and. What in this country, Lord, this country of soot, where breath is easily snuffed out of a body, Lord, what is this country? This country that is not my father's, Lord. What in this country can a father promise his daughter but smoke? Lord, my sister Ebony says no one turns over the earth when a Black girl goes missing, Lord. When a Black girl goes missing, she goes like smoke. And no one turns when a Black girl goes, when she goes missing, Lord, she goes. And Lord, I've been and not been no one, Lord. I have no tools with which to turn the earth except my pen, which is a useless shovel. Lord, the bed I rest my body on is asphalt, Lord, and in my sleep I turn. And back in my mother's country, there is a chorus of mothers still singing to no one. Bring back our girls, goes the refrain of the song. Bring back our girls, they sing. Bring back our girls, and I, being no one, join the chorus, and I sing and sing. Bring back our girls with the wings on their backs intact. With words, I string them back to the backs their mothers backed them with. I sing them back into their mother's arms. I sing them wings. I sing them and sing them back. And Lord, I bring them. In the collection that is coming out next year through Alice James' book, there is sort of like a longish sequence of poems that I started writing while my daughter, who's gonna be 3 years old, this week actually, on Friday. Uh, Before she was born, sort of they're like tracking the developmental stages. You know, this week she's as big as a lemon, and the other week, she's as big as a watermelon. Just sort of like noticing that while the world was sort of like burning in 2020. You know, so. This is a poem that is sort of like a long sequence, tracking that and also tracking the world. It's called To You in Your Dark Lake, Moving Darkly Now. And it is a line that I took from another poem. 7 weeks. Oh, won't you bud, my berry blue? 10,000 times bigger now than when your mother and I dreamt you into being. My blue. It could be true. It could be myth. The boiling blueberries in milk gave the early colonists gray paint. It matters little, my truest blue. I cannot wait to paint the world with you. 14 weeks. Next to the shadow of a tree whose name I did not know, I sat and thought upon the navel orange size of you, about the navel orange too. I am obsessed, I must admit, by what and how a thing is named and is unnamed. Coincidence is what we name what we cannot explain through linear time. Let's say your story actually started in the 17th century inside a monastery. Dear one, I think the womb must be a country too. The whole of you a fist. What lawless law did you protest today? Did you, dear one? Did you at all protest today? 21 weeks. My sunflower, now crowned to hill the size of a large banana. You kick, kick, and stretch just like your mother's skin. Blessed, how it continues to make room for you. You body surfer, you belly surf. May it ever be the untroubled water you swim in. And if there be anything at all that troubles you, give it trouble, dear. Trouble it good. Dear you, don't you forget to thank the neurons in your brain today, the amniotic fountain that you drink from. Blessed that every day it has a different taste. 28 weeks. You are now the size of a head of lettuce, which was, if you are able to imagine it, first cultivated for the oil that could be obtained from its seeds. When I was born, the soundtrack to the real or brutal things men did and do for oil played and hasn't stopped. Now, I'm a citizen among a people who believe a white man brought the letters to their continent. Dear one, what are you dreaming of tonight? Blink twice, dear one, if you believe the world will ever change. 35 weeks. My dear spaghetti squash, what world you'll meet when you arrive, what world you've been invited to, this world with forks in hand prepared to feast, this oven world, this stovetop world, this hot and eager world that's bent on making something out of you. You with more fat and meat on your bones now. You with a soft skull that will soon be thickened by life. Your head in the direction of the cervix, child. Are you ready? Are you, dear child? Dear Lord, What have we done? The last poem I'm going to read is a very, very new poem. Last month, I had the opportunity to sort of read the a version of the poem that was commissioned by a group here in Houston. It's sort of like space for musicians to gather and think about, compositions. And I was very honored to be sort of like the only writer, the only poet who was also like asked to be part of that conversation. So I was like listening to like compositions, and I had to do my poem, sort of like competing with like violins and piano, and I just have my voice, which is what we have as poets, right? But even that, is a lot. I feel like sometimes, if that's the only thing you have, your voice is a powerful instrument too, I feel like. So um it takes its title from Wittgenstein's philosophical tract, and it is this portion of the book about the limits of language, which we poets sort of think about often. What can language do? Wittgenstein said, the limits of language, is also the limits of my world, right? Sort of like where language ends, that's also where the world ends, in a way. Which also, the opposite might be true, right? Where language begins is where the world begins. So, it is my job to think about language and what it does. And especially for things you don't have a language for just yet. Um, of that language which alone I understand. Who led it? My rudderless tongue at the helm of language. Though like a boat I'm building it, it does not yet exist. A language which alone I understand. How can I language this? A war-torn world. How can I language it for my daughter, who is soon to turn 3, old enough to grasp the basic rules of grammar, its tenses and plurality, but young enough to still be fascinated by the way they slip through the fingers like sand? Buckle me out, she says. So because, she says. What is it called like, she says. Jump me in the air, she says. War, no, genocide is not a word she knows just yet. It is a holy thing. Her laughter this morning, across the world in Gaza, a father will hear his daughter's voice for the last time. I am at the border of language, asking, where does a child's laughter go when it stops? When the walls that would otherwise echo our wills are turned to rubble? Let me languish in this, that I cannot language life back into the many killed. I worry meaning out of language, but in the language of the dead, what is the word for breath? Yet, alive in me is a long lost language of silt. What I want left of me for my offspring when I am gone is what the gentle spring leaves as legacy for the bank. I am a poet, which means I can tell the shape of every word on the tip of my tongue. I have known grief to be a square. Tonight, it is a cone. I am a dog without a bite. I am a wounded dog that makes no sound. My mouth a witness stand. My teeth are witnesses. I confess that I too have been guilty of thinking war a metaphor for what it's not. I know it now. Not every language is a mother tongue. Speak to me, mothers who know too well the language of loss. mothers who have no language but loss. What language has mothered you, and which has smothered your voice? My tongue was forked from birth, but in this murderous language I inherited, I find a way to address and redress the world. I find in it a bloodied dress. What else to do but wear it well? The lace frill of it, until I am spent and worn out. In this language, shovel in hand, I find a well-worn path, if not out, and through whatever sorrow each new day welcomes us with. I think I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Up next, we have Sarah Bawani. She's an award-winning poet, author, freelance editor, clinical social worker, and MFA poetry student at Texas State University, serving as the assistant managing editor of its on-campus journal, Porterhouse Review. She published Wholehearted, a collection of poetry and prose, in 2018, which won Daybreak Press Publishing's Best Poetry Book Award, and her second book, Quarter Life Crisis, was published with us here at Flower Song Press in October. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Edward, and thank you, Edward and Avery and everybody who put this together. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm also super grateful for the poets before me, who even are just acknowledging the events of the world right now in their poetry and in their work. I've just been to so many events where there's just been no mention of them, and so it's kind of nice to not be the first person to really talk about it and bring attention to it, and recognize that while we're here in our homes and warm, people are not, and people are buried under rubble. So I have a couple of poems to read, some from the new collection, and then I would also like to read an essay that I wrote recently in the last couple of weeks with what's been happening, that I think would be fitting for something like this. But I'll start with a poem from Quarter Life Crisis called The Motherland. The motherland has been awaiting my return, and after 17 years, I crossed the ocean to make the journey home. I dreamed of the day she would welcome me with frail arms and how I would weep at her feet. I always imagined myself as that child of diaspora who would inhale the fragrance of the dirt, falling in love with her many flaws, and I anxiously counted down the days until we would be reunited. But when I stepped off the plane, she was beyond recognition. Did it match the description or the pictures my parents had lamented over throughout the years? Her scent was pungent and unbearable, smog startling my eyes with tears. Garbage and beggars with missing limbs lined her streets. There was no pleasant surprise, only a mockery of what she was. All the parts I thought I would love about her had atrophied away into oblivion, and the men in the streets ogled me as I searched in my broken mother tongue for any remnants I could salvage. I now find myself lodged in the liminal space between two vastly different worlds. This one is nothing like I had dreamed of, while the one I now call home played a role in her demise. The bridge between both has long since decayed. Which side of the crevice, then, shall I climb out of? A little bit lost. Okay. This one is, I think this is a fun, spicy poem that I really like reading. It's called A Response to You're a Little Too Radical. Yes, because the dirt that crumbles between our fingers has not yet dried from all the blood that was spilled to fulfill manifest destiny. Because despite all the work, there are days the mirror cackles at my unruly curls and dark skin. Because July 4th is a cacophony of fireworks raining down from the night sky to muffle the cacophony of bombs raining down back home. Because billionaires could eradicate world hunger but are instead eating us alive with greed only to dehydrate themselves in space. Because the decayed bones of children are begging to be unearthed. because the global south dared to defy gravity and was forced to orbit a celestial body it had vowed never to bow down to, because prophets were also considered too radical, because the Middle Passage was the most unwilling graveyard to ever exist where nobody was dignified with a funeral, because the people who claim to represent us screech at the sight of pigs but still scavenge for photo ops with them, because Mother Earth is being strangled by lined pockets and empty hearts, because a bookstore owner mourns his life's work knowing he can no longer bring smiles to the people of Gaza, because a publicly known rapist just gave a grandiose speech at a wedding, because your favorite sheikh is fondling little boys and girls, because slavery is now concealed behind bars, because the man who beats his wife is a spitting image of the man who writes policies to tear families apart, because some of us still believe that the entities dripping of flesh at their jaws are coming to save us, because all of this is the true violence that they keep distracting you from, because every single oppression is interconnected and there is so much work to be done, because this world feels so evil some days that I am positive God's greatest mercy to mankind was creating hell. Call me radical, because I don't know how to live in this world without that fire, because this rage feels like I'm about to burn it all down, because I dream of the day we can build a new world from the ashes, because I swear there is no other way to be, because it is the only way to be. I've never read this one out loud before at anything. And like mild content warning, there's some distressing things in here, I suppose. The poem is called A List of Ways Oppressors Use God's Name to Further Their Own Agenda. 1. A young woman in Medina sits on the cold marble with her mat and prayer beads near the dome of Masjid al-Nabawi. She is not allowed inside to see the chamber where the Prophet is buried but for twice a day. A man passing by, who doesn't even work there, snatches up her belongings and violently scatters them all over the floor. He screams, "Women are not allowed near the Prophet." Muslims believe the Prophet has awareness of those who come to visit him. The man walks away satisfied, believing he is doing God's work. He is so focused on prowling for misbehaving women who don't belong there that he doesn't notice the fire beneath his feet. 2. I'm an imam. I know how to conduct marriages, he insists to his second, third, and then fourth secret wife. None of the women know of the other's existence. The third is pregnant. 3. The man lashes his whip for the 100th time on a mother's back for not picking the designated amount of cotton that is required of her fragile hands. God made the white man better, he spits out later on his 4th swig of whiskey. His skin is the first thing the angels tear from him when he's laid into his grave. 4. The colonizers destroy more homes in Palestine to create settlements for their own. We are God's chosen people, they proclaim. The ghosts of the massacred children live in the walls. 5. God would not want you to abort your child, they proclaim, as the 12-year-old mother lays panting with her belly bigger than her frontal lobe. Having this baby will kill her, but God hates women more than he hates unborn babies, so obviously she must sacrifice herself. She begins to bleed out. Her body has not grown into woman just yet, and the man who raped her knew it. The heartbeat grows faint. It stops eventually. She is told they both belong in hell. She waits for the flames to lick up her tears. 6. Ya Hajja, you are not allowed to touch the door of the Kaaba. Ya Hajja, read this pamphlet about how you should dress when visiting the house of God. Ya Hajja, Umrah is not a fashion show. The dress in question is beige and has 3 inches of spangles on the edge of the sleeve. The woman is not wearing makeup. Her worship was accepted long before she walked through the gates. 7. The president of a dying empire drops a bomb every 8 minutes for the entirety of his rule. Most times it hits children, innocents, wipes away entire cities from maps. God bless America, the men thunder in unison from behind their joysticks. We killed all the terrorists. The surviving children emerge from the rubble with tears streaming from the shrapnel in their eyes. Frantically searching for any sign of a family, they come across a crate of guns instead. Allahu Akbar. Where does it go? There we go. I'm going to do a lighter one. This is a voice poem I wrote. kind of, I guess, like an ode to like my middle school self. A lot of Muslim women who are young and who wear the hijab or headscarf get really excited when they see another one who looks like us in school, at the grocery store. And this is just kind of like a voice poem for like a middle school hijabi girl who found another hijabi girl that looks like her. It's literally called Ode to the New Hijabi in School. Salamu alaikum feels weird to say here, doesn't it? Let's just stick with salam, girl, so where are you from? Do you want to ask the teacher where you and I can pray dhuhr together in the middle of lunch? Chiffon or satin or viscose or modal, pins or no pins, undercap or no? How do you drape it so perfectly? Will you give me a tutorial after class? By the way, that salad at lunch has bits of bacon in it. Be careful. Have you seen that brown boy with a nice beard across the hall? Do you think he's Muslim or Wallah bro Muslim? He plays basketball at the masjid every Friday night, but I saw him holding hands with that girl over there, so probably the latter. Astaghfirullah, that's gross. She's not even pretty, she's just white. Let's break our fast together at the pep rally. I already have 100 in this class, but we get extra credit for going. Do your parents not let you stay out late or listen to music either? Which masjid do you spend Ramadan at? Anyway, the boys keep asking me why we wear this thing on our heads and if Osama was our grandfather. How much you want to bet we'd be suspended if we actually said yes? Us feisty girls, wrapped in elaborately pinned scarves that can't hide the mouth on us, designated expert on all things math, curry, and terrorism. Someone asked me the other day if you and I are related to each other, even though we speak different languages and have tremendously distinct complexions. We might as well be. We're the only ones who understand what it means to be so radiant that no one around us notices. Subhanallah. I think I'm going to read this essay now, and if we have time, I'll close with a hopeful poem. Because but just ping me if I go over time in any way. So this one's still being edited. It's kind of like in its almost final draft version, but Infrarealista Review agreed to publish it, which I'm really excited about. I wrote it after the solar eclipse, actually. It was like a very specific time. I think there was something in the air, I'm sure. But of course, it was inspired by the events of the world. And of course, this was 3 weeks ago, and so much has happened even since then. It's called What's in a Name? In 1983, a baby orca now known as Tilikum was captured off the coast of Iceland and sold to an aquarium for entertainment. In the wild, orcas swim anywhere between 40 to 140 miles a day, but he was held captive in a 31 by 23 by 12-foot tank for years, along with 2 older female orcas. Trained while being punished through the collective deprivation of food, the other orcas abused him for years, leaving bloody teeth marks across his body each morning. Decades ago, a displaced and traumatized people made their way to a promised land. Centuries ago, another group of explorers seeking glory and adventure arrived at the shore of a landmass they didn't know existed. Both groups were welcomed warmly, peacefully by its natives, despite their varied cultures, languages, and skin color. Before long, through secret treaties and written declarations unbeknownst to the natives, the guests demanded the land for their own. Celebrations and gatherings turned violent as the visitors demolished native villages, slaughtered their food sources, and violently removed them from their homes while claiming them as their own. God has willed it, they declared. With the colonizers' manifest destiny, the natives' destiny became manifest. The natives retaliated, fighting for their home, their land, their trees. The visitors, outraged at their fury, called them barbaric, savage, inhuman, animals, violent. Today, the natives live on small strips of land designated to them, their resources cut off, imprisoned within a place they had once been free. Food deserts exist in abundance. Children are malnourished. The people are regulated, deprecated, decimated through disease. But we do not deem this as violence. Violence is also a cage. Violence is not being allowed to leave home. Violence is being trapped so tightly together you cannot breathe. Experts say that those exposed to violence from a young age suffer from post-traumatic stress and even psychosis. This applies to humans or orcas or other creatures. However, there is no diagnosis in the DSM for experiencing violence on a regular basis, which follows into adulthood and old age. Children in these small plots of land have something so beyond post-traumatic stress disorder there isn't even a name in our languages for it. One side demands freedom, while the other side demands their death. This is how you systematically dehumanize an entire nation. In 1991, Tilikum drowned one of his trainers. Public attention forced the aquarium's closure. He was transferred to another tank, housed with more hostile orcas, and he continued suffering. The ocean's orca is today's most infamous killer whale. It's not really known what turns a nonviolent creature into a murderer, except the violence done onto them. Violence does indeed beget violence, but we are so good at erasing history, aren't we? We are so good at pretending the truth isn't staring at us behind bars. It is believed that killer whales in the wild never kill humans, but put them in a cage, let them wake up bloody each morning, and you have created something as deadly as their name. And what's in a name? The name Tilikum in Chinook jargon means friend, common people, relationship, tribe. Notice how the name killer whale has persisted while their true nature is anything but. Notice how orca becomes killer whale. Notice how people shoved into cages or bombed into smithereens become terrorists, barbaric when they finally fight back. Colonizer becomes victim. Oppressor becomes oppressed. In the story of Adam's creation, the angels, recognizing humans' capability of great destruction for the first time in their existence, questioned God. Sometimes I wonder if the angels know us better than we know ourselves. The hunger for power drives us to put each other in cages again and again, and we are appalled when our captives bite back. Aggressor, oppressor, terrorist, monster, we who pride ourselves in our values of freedom put a stamp of disapproval on others for demanding their own. When Black Lives Matter protests erupted in the summer of 2020, some smashed windows led to everyone treading backwards. Condemn the violence, stop the violence, the other side shouted, and we succumbed, flailed. Every time after 9/11 that a suicide bomber blows himself up, Muslims collectively get on social media and feel the need to apologize, to condemn the act, to remind white Americans over and over that we do not support the violence. But why are those who have cultivated these seeds of violence given a pass? A desperate fringe group launched poorly made bombs into the land that used to belong to their ancestors. For the first time in decades, they broke the walls of cages that had imprisoned them for no crime except their ethnicities. Violence begetting violence, white phosphorus clouds rained down bombs, 6,000 of them over the span of a week. The international community cheered them on. A people's nightmare turned into another's viewing marathon. 1 million Iraqis were killed in the early 2000s because someone lied about weapons of mass destruction. There is yet to be an apology about that mistake. On October 11, 2023, our president claimed to have seen 40 beheaded babies with his own eyes. His own government retracted his statement as false, but children from the other side had already paid the price. In justifying the death of the colonizers' children, they killed 3 times as many on the other side, and this number is now outdated. Lies are the best fuel for violence, and we collectively fanned its flames. In 2010, Tilikum violently killed another one of his trainers. The aquarium hid his history from the public until investigative reporters uncovered this. The slow outrage then began, but Tilikum was nearly 30 years old by then and dying. Tilikum killed 3 people because those who held him captive followed the money instead of acknowledging that he was going insane from the abuse and confinement. Tilikum sired 21 offspring in captivity, though, and was known as the aquarium's chief sperm bank. It's marvelous what we produce when we control each other. Occupation is good for control. Control is good for pocketbooks. Fat pocketbooks are good for power, and the cycle continues. As of October 14th, defense stocks were at an all-time high. $8 billion were casually dropped into another country's bloody hands earlier in that week, while the rest of us begged for a reprieve from student loan debt. Violence and war are good for the economy, they say, but the rest of us shout, "Stop the violence!" But we only stop shouting it when we shout it when violence stops being beneficial for us. Humans back each other and other creatures in the corners and demand submission until captives fight back. Headlines then read, "How on earth could this possibly have happened?" Historians explain possible causes for backlash. There is something particularly insidious and arrogant in our belief that we can control things bigger than us. Orcas, entire nations. Hope. We do not learn from our past. We assert power over and over each other and pretend it is not violent. Our tax dollars erase entire cities from maps, but we must not keep erasing history. What if Tilikum was never taken captive? What if he had never been imprisoned within a small pool? What if he was cared for? What would freedom for him have looked like? What if humans stopped spending so much time trying to assert power over each other, wishing death upon those who have what they don't, thinking ourselves better than each other? Could we then make a world that the angels would have been proud of? Thank you. And I can close on a hopeful poem, or I can stop. I think I might already be over time, but Edward, Avery, I'll defer to y'all.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. This poem was commissioned through ACLU Texas. It's called Planting Seeds. And it's kind of an antithesis to the poem I read earlier about our response to You're a Little Too Radical, and hopefully you'll see why. When I was 7, upon hearing that my family was to be uprooted for the 3rd time in my life across the country, my feral rebellion to my little Ohio suburban home was to do the opposite, to plant what I hoped would become an apple tree. A few brown seeds of the last apple I ate went into a hole in our flower bed I dug with my grubby little hands, desperate to return one day and discover quite literally the fruits of my labor. But at 7, I knew nothing about gardening, nothing about the proportion of sun to soil to water, and certainly nothing about patience. Yet the hope I had that it would blossom is something I think we could extract, something we could make the sweetest nectar from, something to make us pause for a moment and drink in the innocence, the simplicity, go back to the basics, go back to the possibility, no, the certainty that planting a seed can and will create a new and better world. So tell me, what hopes did you have for your world at 7 years old? Did you dream about planting seeds of your own? Did you tend to your own gardens of promises beneath which rivers flowed? What trees were you forced to leave behind but naively trusted to bloom in your absence? When was it that you or a loved one were plucked from this innocence like weeds? Which of you had to withstand the unimaginable for your naivete to combust? What new story was it that lit the first match beneath you? How old were you when you started fanning the flames of your own personal fire? How many hearts did you leave kindled on your path to justice? Which of this world's most horrible abominations did you put a torch to? More importantly, at what point did that fire engulf you? When did you hope to find yourself in the thick of the blaze only to lose yourself in the darkness? How deep were you in the inferno before the heat burned you up and burned you out? Listen, I've written a lot of poems about rage and fire and the anger required to tackle the monsters we only thought would haunt us in our dreams. I too have fought and cried and tried to wake up, but found myself on the front lines, on the phone, online, with the leaders, the lava cooking me alive, and I too have daydreamed about what the world would look like if we burned it all down and started over. I too have burnt up my last flickering candle, romanced by the poetry of the destruction, the hypnotic dance of the flame, eager to warm up my cold heart, striving to feel something besides despair. And yet there's a reason burnout contains the word burn. There's a reason fire only takes us so far. When we are left with a colossal pile of ashes and charred remains asking, now what? Know that it is not fire that will create a new world, but water, because even after the great flood, a dove still returned to Noah's ark with an olive branch. Did you know that as babies, water makes up 78% of our bodies, dropping to 65% by the time we reach our first birthday? Maybe that explains why we are so full of life as children, so full of virtue. What a gift that the answer has been gushing within us this whole time, that the sea, ebbing and flowing within our very bodies, has given us a lesson in balance from the moment we were born. Did you know that water asserted its dominance on this planet millions of years before fire ever could? Did you know the reason you can see the Grand Canyon from space is because a persistent ocean, now long gone, knew it could literally change the world? Water is the most versatile thing to ever exist. It is the only major substance that can take on all 3 forms of matter, adapt to its environment. No need for it here, it will evaporate and bless the gift of itself somewhere else in the world. Too cold and it will work to preserve its freshness by transforming to ice. It can destroy just as well as it sculpts. It can house life and in the same breath erode it. Water quenches the fire but doesn't stop there, but nourishes, pours into, protects, grows, rebuilds. So go ahead, rise up, but do it like an ocean wave. Go crashing down only to come right back. Erode those systemic barriers, but be a monsoon. Shower them with so much of your rage, but leave flowers and budding crops in the process. Safeguard your people with a fury, but be like the glaciers, which love fresh water so much they have been calmly rock solid to protect it for thousands of years. Be like the water that baptizes a baby, that purifies a Muslim 5 times a day before prayer. Moses may not be here to split the Red Sea anymore, but the pharaohs of our time without a doubt will drown in our love. And what world could we create if we all watered our own little apple trees? If we didn't abandon them to chase the fire, but instead nourish them? There is nothing more exhilarating than uprooting the walls, but there is nothing more rewarding than cultivating the bridges. No evil is greater than the divine power of our love. And perhaps changing the world is too big an ambition, but there are endless possibilities when planting new seeds. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. All of you were incredible. Thank you so much. We have time. We have a few minutes for some questions. If anyone has any, can you please post them now so that we can read them out to our guest features? Jacob is asking, what was the name of the last poem you read?
The one right now, it was called Planting Seeds.
Awesome. Anyone else have questions for our authors? I did on the chat put the links to each and every featured author's either website or link to the book or both. Um, yeah, I agree with Amanda. Tonight was absolute fire. Yeah, it was amazing, all of you. Okay. I do invite you all to go to each author's websites or social media links if they're available and check out. I know many of you have readings on YouTube and links to readings that you've done. Sarah right now is on a book tour here in Texas. She'll be in San Antonio tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Dallas after that. Um, I wanted to ask, I guess I'll ask everyone a question. What are your new projects that you have going on right now? And I'll start with Genevieve.
I know it sounds really cliche, but I'm actually working on a children's book. I, for a while, was doing something that I wish I had not started. So when I was a kid, when my tooth fairy came, it left a poem. And it was not, they were not good poems. They were like, roses are red, violets are blue. You know, here's a quarter just for you. And so I decided to do the same thing for my kids as they were losing their teeth. Did not realize we had so many teeth, first of all. So that was a lot of work. Got through one all the way. I'm still in the middle of the second one. But the poems were a lot of fun. And I got to play around with how I could make each one different. And so I have all of these tooth fairy poems, 24 to be exact. And I'll have 2 different versions for every tooth. So I'm going to kind of go in and, you know, choose which one I think is best for each and get to the editing of that. But it's sort of a project that's been on the back burner for a while. And I think now is the time to kind of tackle that. So.
Cool. Amy, how about you?
I just have to figure out how to unmute and then repeat it. Man, I'm working on a book of poems that is kind of done-ish. Well, but then the world all goes up and does what it does. I swear I've been like, I'm just waiting. Like I'm been trying really hard to have a really big book of just juicy environmental poems that feel redemptive and healing. And then crazy stuff happens in the world and I become this like sad, angry. But there is an eco poetics book that hopefully will come out next year with Flower Song that I've been working on. I have a book of essays. I basically, if y'all are writing about your stuff, I collected a bunch of my poems and, my essays. So next year there'll be a book of essays on kind of education, community work that'll come out with Unsolicited. And next week I'm going to be, I'm trying to teach more, actually. I'm trying to keep my body moving because my background is in dance and doing more workshops in text and movement, like narrative and movement to kind of do that physical stuff. Because I found that it's just a great way to kind of, the writing is a good healing modality, but also movement and just the breathing is helpful for me. So I'm hoping to do that as to do that more. So I'm going to be with some students next week working on that with some friends in Santa Cruz. It was so great to hear everybody tonight. I feel so nourished by all the poets. I can't believe I haven't heard you guys anymore. I mean, I snooped around online to hear you guys before we met, but hearing you in person is so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you everyone for coming.
Ayo?
For me, just finishing or trying to finish. My deadline keeps moving. Because of me. Uh, Finishing edits on the book that's coming out next year. Through Alice James. Just it's like one or two poems that I'm like, I still add one more. I feel like this was like the same process to Edward, if you remember. I was like, okay, we're done. And I'm like, two more poems. Yes. So I'm sort of like in that process right now too. Um, and then poems as they sort of like come along. Um, I'm a teacher full time. I teach English at a performing arts, visual performing arts high school here in Houston, and also like a dad. So that takes the priority of my life. So I feel like that's sort of like my big project. And every once in a while, when I do have time for poems, I do that.
Thank you. And Sarah, I know that you've got a fresh book hot off the press, but tell us a little bit about what you might be working on.
Yeah, this is the book, by the way. I'm so happy about it. Oops, a little bit blurry, but that's an hourglass. It's yeah, it just came out I think 2-3 weeks ago, so I'm still definitely riding off the high of that. But right now I'm doing my MFA in poetry, and so part of when you finish an MFA is having your own body of work. So hopefully, in a year and a half, I'll have a collection of 60 poems. But clearly, obviously, I've also been experimenting with creative nonfiction and memoir and essay writing, which I really love, and I'm hoping, hopefully, I can meet my ambitions about this. But would love to also publish a collection of essays at some point. So chipping away at both slowly.
Thank you. And we just have time for one question that's here by Scott Moore E. Medina. And we'll start with you, okay, Sarah, and move backwards the way we started. So it's worked around the edges of violence and hate and war, but could anyone expand on the universal role, power of love in the events and circumstances that were touched upon?
Yeah, I have so much to say about that, but I'll try and keep it short. I think if we really want to talk about love, um, and kindness and compassion and peace, which are like these words that are thrown around in times of war, it's really about. I don't want to use the word reparations, but I will use the word reparations. It's about really meeting people where they're at and looking at what they need. We can't just blanket love and peace and like throw these words around, and just like wish for things when great harm has been done and there's no way to repair that great harm. So I really think that true love is embracing a marginalized or oppressed population, and really embracing that they, being the victims of their circumstances, know exactly what they need to heal and to move forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Ayo?
Yeah. I My 10th graders, we just finished like this week is sort of like our the end of the cycle that we're on, the second cycle of the semester. And our conversations have been sort of like around the idea of justice and equality and interconnectedness and altruism, and injustice, all of that, which is sort of like very, very much in the same vein as, the question Scott posed. Um, and, with my 11th graders, we're talking about feminism, gender issues like rights and wrongs across history. And, there is no way to talk about love without acknowledging. We first have to acknowledge that things are not, right with the world, right? That things are hateful, right? Before we can even like bring love into the conversation, right? We can't talk about justice without talking about injustice. Right? This is sort of like the thing that I've been like uh teaching, so to say, to my students, these past 5, 6 weeks. You cannot talk about liberation without talking about oppression, right? It's impossible. It really is impossible. You can't talk about hope. The reason we bring up hope is because things are not hopeful, right? Is because things are dire, right? The reason why we would bring love into the conversation is because, there are people who are hateful, right? And beyond that, people who are like very, very much willing to kill you, right? Like dismiss your humanity, right? So it starts with that. It starts with that. The act of doing that work of recognizing hate, recognizing violence, right? And naming it for what it is and not shying away from it. That is an act of tremendous love, right? There's nothing more loving than that, I feel like. That's what I'll add to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I was on mute. Sorry. How about you, Amy?
Yup. I have a lot of thoughts about that, obviously. I mean, one of the things is that love is, there's no love without understanding. So are we doing the work of understanding? Understanding ourselves, obviously, but also understanding each other. And love isn't held in place without understanding. So like peacefulness, lovingness on someone else's terms without understanding someone else's situation, someone else's storytelling. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation, but we can work on understanding. I know that as a teacher, I know that as a student, we can come to understand things better by being exposed to them, by having good experiences with people. And so I have, at a time when things have been so rough or so, I mean, when I was going through the book, I'm like, oh, wow, I have all these poems. I don't even have to read anything I've written this month, and they all fit. That's messed up. But I had such a snapshot experience, and I'm sure everyone has in their own way, but just because of where my body was and how things unfolded in the last month, I could see how the stories came in immediately to secure a certain understanding, and that we weren't looking at each other's stories, and that there is this push to reinforce a certain understanding of something or another understanding of something. So like my push to myself is, I'm going to listen to Al Jazeera. I'm going to listen to Haaretz. I'm going to really try to understand without a defensiveness about things. So, yeah, that's where love comes from me, is that hopefulness. And if things right now are so unimaginable, then why can't something wonderful like Sarah is alluding to be also imaginable? If reality is unimaginable, then how can we say something better is unimaginable? I'd rather throw my chip in with imagining the unimaginable. And that, for me, if we are heading for love, it has to begin with mutual understanding that's authentic.
Thank you so much. How about you, Genevieve?
Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said so far. With recent events and circumstances, I've been feeling really angry. And when that anger is welling up in me, I try to think of the future, like in the small ways, and I know I'm answering this like my poems observe things, but in the small ways, I really think to myself, like, I really want to snap or yell right now at somebody, but I'm not going to, and I really stop and think about how I can show love in that moment. And thinking about the future, like, how do I want to look back on myself? How did I show love? That's really, again, the tiny thing here that we're talking about. But if you do that enough throughout the day, I feel like love can be apparent, even in the worst situations, even when we are feeling so angry about what's happening. And the poems too. Writing a poem, I feel like often anger is the reason why I write a poem. I joke a lot of times that my poems are often like a list of complaints where, it's one way to deal with that. And it's one thing we can put out there. And I would claim that is showing love too. It's putting something out in the world that shows love.
Thank you, thank you. Truly, all of you, wonderful. Thank you for being a part of Essentially Poetic. Um, it seems like this is a great space to listen to um, wonderful works, important and necessary words as well. So I'll leave you with a goodbye. We put up a QR code and a link to our GoFundMe if you feel uh, that you can contribute. If not, please share it with your friends. But thank you again. Be kind to each other, be kind to nature, be water, and water your apple trees. Thank you so much. Thank you, Avery, and everyone else for being a part of Essentially Poetic. Goodbye.